Okay, we need
Attention
to,
in the building, attention in the building. We'll be starting our meeting
going to
now.
get started.
Mrs. Arrett, can we have you take a seat?
That got real quick.
Domino.
It's okay. Alrighty, well, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Sorry for the delay getting started. We had a little bit longer executive session and had to get ready for that. So we already had called the meeting to order, so we'll go ahead and do the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you can stand with us. And Director Jones, do you want to kick us off? Alrighty, well, thank you for joining us this evening for our work session. At the very end, we do have a couple business items. So before the executive session, we actually already called the meeting to order and did roll call and did the agenda approval before. So we have a couple of proclamations for this evening. So this month is the Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. So whereas in the month of May, we take time to recognize and celebrate Asian American and Pacific Islander heritage in the United States, and whereas Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month seeks to honor and recognize Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders and their countless contributions to our society in a variety of fields from science and technology to business and cultural arts. And whereas as a district, we are committed to creating an environment that promotes access, opportunity, and a sense of belonging for all. We want to recognize that our Asian American and Pacific Islander community members bring unique perspectives and talents to the Grand Valley. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education of Mesa County Valley School District 51 hereby proclaims May 2024 as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month and encourages our community to engage in activities and events that celebrate their heritage and highlight the contributions of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders throughout history. So, yep. Thank you. And then we have our Teacher Appreciation Month. So whereas the Board of Education acknowledges the essential role that teachers play in shaping the minds and futures of our students, and whereas Teacher Appreciation Month provides a moment for us to extend our gratitude for the tireless efforts and dedication of our D51 teachers, and whereas every day our teachers devote themselves to fostering, engaging, and inclusive environments, instilling a passion for learning and empowering their students to reach their full potential. And whereas teachers are an integral part of our community, actively contributing to a brighter future for all students, we recognize the profound impact our teachers have on students' lives and express our sincere appreciation for their unwavering dedication, creativity, and commitment to D51's vision and mission. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education of Mesa County Valley School District 51 officially proclaims the month of May 2024 as Teacher Appreciation Month, and we encourage our community to join us in expressing our gratitude to our teachers, recognizing their exceptional contributions to our students, staff, and D51 community. So thank you, everyone, for all you do.
I did want to mention real quick to a shout out to our nutrition services department, because this is the second year I think we've partnered with them from our office to make cookies as like a nice sweet treat for all the teachers at the schools for Teacher Appreciation Week. So thank you to our nutrition services department for doing that for our teachers. And I know all of our schools have a lot of different events going on this week, which is exciting. And then I think at the meeting on the 21st, we'll show the video that the foundation put together with different community leaders celebrating our teachers. So again, shout out to all those individuals that are celebrating our teachers, and thanks to the board for the recognition.
Thank you. And then while we don't have a proclamation, yesterday was Holocaust Remembrance Day, and I think it's always important for us to never forget things that have happened in our history. I think it's too easy for one generation to the next that we forget different things that have happened in our world. So I just wanted to put out that because it coincided closely with the board meeting, that we just want to take a moment of silence to just remember what happened during that dark time during World War II. So if we just take a moment with me, we'll have a moment of silence. All right, thank you very much for that. All right, well, we will get into our agenda for this evening. So we have the revised teaching and learning framework presentation. So if that team wants to come on up.
We're in the next presentation. Makes sense. Sorry, you might sit in the middle. I see that a different deck is loaded. I'm Jackie Anderson, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning. I'm not seeing it. Amy, do you have it? Could you? Share it with David. No, it looks like this.
I have a joke for you. Hey, you asked. I have an 8-year-old. Did you hear the joke about the penny? Never mind, it doesn't make any sense. All right, do you have one? You got some good dad jokes, right?
I have a bunch of
Come on.
I have chicken jokes. I have a hen. She can count her own eggs. She's a mathma chicken.
Anybody in the audience got any jokes?
We could actually unplug it and I'll just start. How about that?
It's on the final electronic packet too.
We can just pull it.
Yeah, there it is right there.
Awesome. That's a
Booyah.
PowerPoint. I don't know if it'll go.
Hold on, I'll click for you. I'm clicking.
All right.
Okay, I'm a clicker.
Okay. All right. So we're excited tonight to talk to you about the 2024 Teaching and Learning Framework. I'm Jackie Anderson, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning. And this is Jen Marsh, our Chief Academic Officer. What we're presenting tonight is an executive summary of a document that's significantly longer, but really critically important to teaching and learning in District 51. And we're calling it the 2024 Teaching and Learning Framework with a lot of intentionality because there was and it has been a 2017 Teaching and Learning Framework in our district that's guided a lot of instructional decisions since 2017. And again, tonight and into the fall, we're presenting the 2024. So here's an executive summary of that work, and here are the team members who helped draft and refine the 2024 Teaching and Learning Framework. And so on screen, you can see names of members who contributed to a 2-year process to rewrite that document in our system. The Teaching and Learning Framework elevates competency-based instructional strategies that are Important for all District 51 educators to know, be familiar with, and implement in their context to support high-quality education across our system. This is a timeline of the revision process. Again, our first teaching and learning framework was introduced in 2017. The strategic plan was composed in 2022, and this new iteration of the teaching and learning framework is coming out in 2024. And it's important that those two documents work together in synergy so that we aren't working towards different aims. So the goals of the strategic plan, anything that could be connected to teaching and learning, are elevated by the church teaching and learning framework. And so with a new strategic plan in 2025 and beyond, we would update this teaching and learning framework too, and they would work now together in a cycle. So we're excited about that change. There are other changes too. This is a graphic still under development. It's in draft form, but an image that would be the cover page of that document. And there were 4 dimensions in the 2017 teaching and learning framework. Those same 4 dimensions still appear in the 2024 teaching and learning framework. They're at top. They're learner-centered environment, design for learning, monitoring learning, and professional engagement. But there are things that are different that have changed in the 2024 edition, and that's the inclusion of core beliefs. There are 4 of them that organize each dimension. Practices, instructional practices. Previously, those were questions, open-ended questions. There are recommendations for different stakeholder groups, students and parents in the community, the district alongside teachers. And then there are additional tools and supports. There's a typo on this slide, but additional tools and supports in the appendix. Yeah. It was my first time in Canva. Couldn't read it. It's so tiny. Yeah. So there are 4 slides now that are a preview of what you would find in any one dimension of the 2024 teaching and learning framework. And so on the right, for me, what's in white, that's a belief statement. There are 4 of those. And then in the gray boxes are examples of practices. So I'll be reading aloud 8 practices. In the whole framework, there are 48, and that's what we're aligning our instructional practices to. So this is a summary of those. The first belief is all learners can and will learn when they feel included, respected, and valued by their learning community. 2 practices that we would implement as educators in any of our roles would be these. In a learner-centered environment, educators celebrate learners' growth, achievement, and positive mindsets and behaviors. In a learner-centered environment, educators foster predictable school and classroom routines and procedures that promote respect, inclusivity, and belonging. The second belief is on screen and it reads, through rigorous academic learning opportunities, all learners must be challenged, believed in, and supported to reach common high expectations. 2 practices that support that belief are on the right in gray. In the design of learning, educators provide learners many opportunities to respond, deepening their engagement and understanding of content and concepts, while also developing their academic voices. Another practice we would adopt, in the design of learning, educators backwards plan with student data so as to ensure all learners will have access to grade level content or higher, and where appropriate, educators plan to scaffold, accommodate, or extend. The third belief, learning is enhanced by continuous cycles of practice, feedback, assessment, and reflection. 2 practices. And Andrea, your head is blocking part of it, and so, good, thank you, I'm good, thank you. In monitoring learning, educators provide learners multiple opportunities for revision and multiple opportunities to demonstrate what they know, understand, and can do, allowing for productive struggle and the opportunity to learn from mistakes. A second practice, in monitoring learning, educators provide learners frequent focused feedback on specific learning goals and provide timely, constructive, and corrective feedback to help learners understand their progress and areas for improvement. And then the fourth belief, educators must take collective responsibility for all students' learning. 2 practices. An engaged professional measures the impact of new or refined practices on student learning, engagement, and belonging, then reflects on the data and makes adjustments. An engaged professional embraces a professional responsibility to learn about effectively responding to the social, emotional, and diverse academic needs of all learners. And so those are 8 practices of 48. This is a document that will go out to our system on Friday of this week. Principals, building leaders are engaging with it now, and we'll engage with it in professional learning through the month of May. And then in the fall, the full teaching and learning framework will be embedded in all of our professional learning. And We'll be digging into all 48 of those practices in each of the 4 dimensions. So we're excited to share that preview with you tonight. What questions do you have or might you have about the teaching and learning framework?
Question I have is on the last one on the educators may take collective responsibility for all students' learning. You have an engaged professional embraces a professional responsibility to learn about effective responding to social, emotional, and diverse academic needs for all learners. Is there going to be training so that teachers and all staff will be able to have strategies to be able to do it in a responsible, professional manner?
Yeah, so the next group that presents is our Professional Learning Strategic Plan Task Force. And that's been one of the goals of the strategic plan, is to embed social emotional learning in our professional learning and in our learning communities. So tonight, they'll report out on the data and some of the next steps that we're taking, and they'll share a preview for you of the professional learning calendars at elementary and secondary. I don't know that we'll address that with maybe the level of detail that you're looking at. What are the specific social emotional learning plans? But per our strategic plan, it's embedding that content in the other professional learning that we run to equip educators. Yep, yep. The next presentation is about how we started to measure that. Yep. Thank you.
So what did we really have before we had this? And is this new, or some of these new? Is some of this complementing? Is some of this tweezed out from what we had? Can you maybe kind of give us a little bit of an overview of where we were?
Yep.
And kind of where we're at? Like, obviously we see where we're at with this right now, but kind of maybe where it changed from, just so we can have sort of that perspective.
The 2017 Teaching and Learning Framework, you would remember this if you've been in our community, and we're in our community at that time, was part of our rollout of PBL, or proficiency-based learning. And coupled with it was another document or tool called the D51 Learning Model. And both of them described instructional practices in our system that we'd align to by level, but they aren't the same, the Teaching and Learning Framework and the D51 Learning Model. And so that second tool was meant to accompany the first, to give greater definition to what it is that we were doing by level to move towards a performance or a proficiency-based system. Today, we talk about that as competency-based learning. And the big idea is this, is that I am as focused on what students have learned, or more focused on what students have learned than what I've taught. It's about paying close attention to what students have actually learned and acquired, competency-based education. So I taught it, but did students learn it? So what are all the tools that we need in our toolbox to be measuring and monitoring whether or not students learned it? A competency-based system would have instructional strategies to support that. And those 4 dimensions help us organize those instructional strategies. So the dimensions are the same. In the 2017 Teaching and Learning Framework, there weren't specific practices listed, there were questions, open-ended questions. This edition, the 2024, names practices, and those were like the 8 that I read.
Can we give it like an example of what those questions were? How might you use data to do something? This identifies how data can be used. So it's not given to the teachers to come up with how might you, it's giving explicit ideas on what those practices would be when you're monitoring learning.
Yeah, so it's much more explicit with practices. And then another change are those beliefs, the idea that we're educators working together make a difference for kids. No educator working in isolation can achieve for students the goals that we have in mind per our strategic plan. It takes educators working together. You'd have to believe that to invest in those instructional strategies.
I think the other thing too, if you want to hit on it, Jackie, are the recommendations. So every person reading the teaching and learning framework can see themselves in it. So what I mean are, you can have parents that will hear the recommendations for parents. Here's a recommendation for community and teachers and administrators. So how does this document, when you look at it through a different lens, or there's a recommendation on how to use it, it comes to life in a different way when you're in a different role.
Yeah, I think the 2017 Teaching and Learning Framework had one audience in mind primarily, and that was classroom teachers. And this keeps in mind many audiences, including students and families and classroom teachers and any educator.
and for different disciplines. So when you read this as a teacher and you're a social studies teacher, or you're a first grade teacher, and you're looking at content, but then there are recommendations, how would you use this document when you shift your focus or your idea when it comes to attendance or behavior? What might how can you use this document that will focus on the area that you're working in at the current time, not just teaching and learning academics?
That's great. I know some of the wording is changing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're kind of going back to this thought of rigorous academic, learning. Not that we necessarily got away from it, but I think we kind of stopped using those words. And it's funny because we were at Junction High School even a few weeks ago, and the students were actually asking for more rigor. They were, and again, I get some students won't. And I think sometimes we confuse rigor with difficulty or with it being complicated, but it's not. And so I can appreciate seeing some of this wording come back because it means that we're actually really checking in to see, have students learned it? Are teachers and educators, they're ready to be able to relay it, to get it out there. And like you said, this is the framework in which everything that we're going to be working through now will kind of funnel through to make sure that we're all moving towards those goals. And then like what Jose Luis said is, addressing all learners as well, so.
Speaking of addressing all learners, one of the other things that came up, that's come up a few times, and I know Jen and I have at least blushed it, but this will give an opportunity to speak to it, is interaction within the teaching. That's one of the things that we heard a lot from that particular group of students was, we don't want to be spoken at for 45 minutes. We want to be involved in and engaged in that learning process. And so, you want to speak? Would you like to share anything just specifically just regarding that and explicitly like the how-to, right?
Yep.
Not just do it, but
Right.
ways in which to do it.
Yeah, and so there are 12 practices in this dimension, and you'd see that reflected alongside this belief across each dimension. So that's another new feature of the 2024 Teaching and Learning Framework is how iterative it is, reinforcing some of those big ideas. Student engagement is one of them. Opportunities to think critically and to make decisions about their own learning, and certainly the rigor that you mentioned is also a part of this 2024 Teaching and Learning Framework. We read The Opportunity Myth, and a couple of years ago brought in one of the authors, as a keynote. But the research is really clear. How do you make more than 1 year's growth in 1 year's time? That should be our concern in the teaching and learning department always. How do you make more than 1 year's growth in 1 year time? And it's really clear that there are 4 things that matter in that respect, and 2 of which are elevated on this slide right here. It's teachers with high expectations and access to grade level content. And that's a real challenge. How do I support and scaffold for my students and bring them into the classroom and help them find success with grade level content and keep expectations high, knowing that there's lots that I need to do still to support students with where they're at and to keep them engaged. So
We'll always meet them where they're at. We want to ensure, but that just because we're meeting them where they're at doesn't mean that's where we stop. That we always want to ensure that we're bringing up that rigor, which is grade level content with grade level expectations, and we're helping them that scaffold that Jackie just talked about, so they have access to that grade level.
Yep.
I have another question. You have those one before, those where all learners can and will learn when they feel included, respected, and valued by their learning community. We look at the Mueller's report and we look at others, like our students are not socially connected to our schools. How are you going to work that into that? Because that's a real concern to me. So we have a high rate of suicides and kids are not connected.
Yeah. First, you have to name it as an expectation and make it really clear that it is an expectation, and then you would coach into it. That happens through professional learning, that happens with ILT teams, that happens on a site-based level. We have goals connected to aims, we call them aim 1 and aim 2, goals around belonging that are also in our strategic plan, and then aligned plans. You'll hear some of that tonight. We're also working on more extensive plans to address the Mueller report. That's not part of tonight's presentation.
And I would say, Jose Luis, as a teacher, so when you look over to the practice on the right, in a learner-centered environment, educators foster predictable school and classroom routines and procedures that promote respect, inclusivity, and belonging. So what are you doing as a classroom teacher in your PLC to talk about what are we doing to ensure that our students feel included and valued in their learning? And so there are activities, and that will go in part of their rituals and routines, that they're meeting with each other, mixing with each other, so that they have that feeling of being respected and valued in their learning community. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you.
This document needed to be updated to do some of that important work in our system. The last iteration was 2017. Without these changes, we're not positioned to do that work and to bring clarity to our system about what it is that we hope to see in teaching and learning.
And you'll bring us data on how you measured that?
Tonight, you'll
Our
have
strategic
data on that.
plan, correct, yes.
Thank you.
And we know that we can still evolve, right? So once this is 3 years is done, what will the 5-year? What will it look like in
Yep.
50 and 51? Oh, 51 and 50, sorry. Oh, have you heard anybody use it yet, regardless? Okay, so I'm the only one. Wrong, but still did said it.
Any other questions, board? All right, thank you both for that. That's a really good update. So we look forward to seeing how this
Thank you.
progresses. All right, so next up, we have our strategic plan update for our staff and professional learning.
I didn't get the slide over. I'll be your clicker. And your introducer.
Yeah, you're gonna,
I can go first.
and then I'll.
Okay, you got it. Good evening. I'm Jennifer Marsh. I'm reading my script though, still, haven't changed, yeah. I'm representing prepared and supported staff focus in the areas of the strategic plan, in the area of staff wellness, diverse and growing pipelines, and professional learning. That actually is not me, that's Nikki, but I took over for this evening. She's sitting back there smiling. In staff wellness, our goals center on improving educators' overall impression of their school and employment in D51. In diverse growing pipelines, our goals are to increase the number of qualified candidates who apply for the positions in D51 and to increase the diversity of our staff. And tonight's presentation is about the professional learning focus area in the goals that you see it above or on your screens. At this time, I'm pleased to introduce two leads of the strategic plan group, Jamie, our elementary assistant director of curriculum and professional learning, and Linnea, coordinator of culturally and linguistically diverse education. Jamie will now introduce the members of the task force and those who will be speaking this evening.
Thank you, Jen. So presenting with Linnea and I tonight are Cami Kidd, principal at Shellady Elementary, Jackie Truckee, who's the assistant principal at Fruta Middle School. Yes, good. Whew, just checking. Carrie Wirtz, instructional coach at Fruitvale, and Heather Flick, coordinator of secondary coaching and professional learning. Also on our task force are Matt Borgman. He's the instructional coach and the MYP coordinator at Palisade High School. Sharon Collis, site director, and Brittany Walker, our K-12 science content specialist. So it's important for us to share with you that the aim of our professional learning priority area is to ensure District 51 educators and leaders engage in professional learning that will lead to students mastering the academic standards, that will support academic skills along life skills, especially those aligned with our graduate profile, that will support educators in effectively responding to the needs of all groups of learners. On screen, you will see a quote from the book, Revisiting Professional Learning Communities at Work, and it reads, "Schools cannot achieve the fundamental purpose of learning for all if educators work in isolation." To meet any of the goals named in our strategic plan, we know it will take educators working together, and our professional learning goals are precisely about that. It's about educators coming together collaboratively in learning communities to plan and adjust their instruction. Professional learning matters. When D51 educators engage in professional learning, it is to equip and empower them with the knowledge, skills, and attitudes they need to meet all students' needs, and to support those educators in their practice as they continue to grow and refine across their careers. Of course, the board and our community are familiar with this calendar. This is our board-adopted calendar for next year, and if you've had students in District 51, you may have a good understanding of what the color coding means. For example, the blue days are work days, and yellow are professional learning in-service days. These days are critically important to equipping D51 educators and to supporting and sustaining District 51 initiatives aligned to our strategic plan goals. Alone, though, they are not sufficient to sustain and accelerate the gains we've made in student growth and achievement the last few years. District 51 is one of only 3 school districts in the state of Colorado to have a positive trend in academic outcomes since 2019 or pre-pandemic. And that doesn't happen by accident or without committed time to professional learning. Those gains toward academic mastery are a product of the hard work of D51 educators who are committed to common goals and high expectations and who work together to ensure each and every student experiences success. So for a more complete view of professional learning that drives our collective work, you'd have to reference our professional learning calendars. Those are considerably more colorful. You can see the 2024-2025 elementary and secondary professional learning calendars on screen now. These calendars change every year based on the analysis of our needs and progress towards initiatives, as well as the input of stakeholders. They will give you a visual of how and when we're coming together to address our professional learning goals. To tell you a little bit more about professional learning designs at elementary is Cami Kidd.
Good evening. I am the principal at Shelley Elementary, and tonight I am pleased to tell you more about the professional learning designs specific to the elementary level. On screen is the month of August, and I'd like to call your attention to 2 dates and designs. One is August 23rd, which is colored green, and it's actually labeled DF for District Friday. Parents of elementary age students know that students are released early on Fridays, and that's for critically important professional learning, sometimes designed by the building principal and sometimes designed by district leadership. August 23rd is what we call a District Friday, and that particular one is dedicated to learning about math and science, specifically the assessments that are common across D51 elementary schools. The professional learning that will be facilitated then helps ensure D51 educators have a good understanding of both what students should be learning in math and science in Q1 and how they will know when students have learned it. On August 26th, which is teal and labeled LL, LL stands for Learning for Leaders. I'm a member of the District Early Literacy Advisory Team, which we call DLAT, and this is a professional learning design that DLAT instructional leaders requested for 24-25 based on the positive experiences building leaders have had this year, getting learning and literacy alongside our D51 instructional coaches. In the year 24-25, there are 4 such half days, and they've been redesigned to include more opportunities for leaders to converse and collaborate with one another, and to include learning on both our year-long literacy and math aims. Through this format, building leaders and instructional coaches will have the opportunity to dig into the new teaching and learning framework, which you just heard about a little bit ago, into reading K-5 classroom look-fors and walkthrough tools, prepare for our D51 Professional Learning Fridays, and learn how AI might enhance our teaching and learning. It's important systemic work, and this will help drive the goals of D51's strategic plan. The 2 professional learning designs I've just described are important in helping us meet strategic plan goals that are connected to positive academic outcomes for students and to goals about educators learning together. And then to tell you more about the professional learning at the secondary level, here's Jackie Truckee.
Thank you, Cami. As Cami said, I'm Jackie Truckee, assistant principal at Fruita Middle School, and I'm pleased to tell you about a couple of other professional learning designs. And so on screen, you'll now see the month of January 2025. We've planned that far out till January 2025 in professional learning, and there are two things in January I'd like to take a minute to explain. The first is January 7th, an in-service day at all levels, and a critically important one because that's when schools look at data and evaluate their progress toward year-long goals. Goals in academics and in culture and climate, along with the student and staff belonging and wellness goal. It's the moment where schools come together and ask, are we at mid-year on track and on pace to meet year-end goals? If so, why? What's going well, and how can we accelerate to the end of the year? If not, why not? And what adjustments do we need to make right now to ensure end-of-year goals are met? At the secondary level, that January 7th in-service date is followed at the end of the month with what we call a NIC convening. NIC, N-I-C, stands for Network Improvement Community. And that's when the middle and high schools come together on one of the 3 dates in purple, January 28th through 30th, to engage in professional learning specific to our quarterly sprints in academics and culture, and to network with other schools who are working toward the same or similar goals. Next year, the focus of NICS will be on highly effective and cross-curricular instructional strategies in literacy as well as common Tier 1 instructional strategies for effective classroom management, or what you might call a healthy and productive learning environment. These professional learning opportunities highlight how we monitor our progress toward reaching building and strategic plan goals, and how the professional learning we engage in throughout the year is targeted and intentional. To share more about how we measure the effectiveness of these and other professional learning engagements is Linnea Hulshoff, Coordinator of Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Education.
Thank you, Jackie. Hello, I'm Linnea Hulshoff, Coordinator of Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Education. And the next few slides are about the ways in which we measure the effectiveness of professional learning in D51. We have formal program evaluation protocols in place to help us know whether the professional learning we offer is, in fact, effective in meeting the needs of teachers and their students. Currently, our program evaluation model is designed to monitor professional learning effectiveness when it's tied to the implementation of a new resource, or any that has been adopted since the 2017 MIL. It reaches many, but not all, D51 educators. This year, we had strong participation rates, 673 responses across all levels, with particularly high representation from elementary because of their place in the resource adoption. This year, we also added questions that would yield data specific to the strategic plan, goals in professional learning, questions about educators' participation in learning communities, about the extent to which their curricular resources affirm different cultural viewpoints, and about the extent to which their curricular resources support the social and emotional needs of students. To tell you more about what we found in this year's data, here's Carrie Wirtz and Heather Flick.
Hello, I'm Carrie Wirtz, instructional coach at Fruitvale Elementary. At the beginning of the presentation, there was a quote that said, "Schools cannot achieve the fundamental purpose of learning for all if educators work in isolation." In my role as an instructional coach, I have the privilege and responsibility of helping educators come together to learn together and to plan together. And when they do that in grade level teams, we call those LCs, or learning communities. I think this might be one of the most important goals of all the strategic plan because I can testify to the power of a learning community and what happens there. Having consistent and weekly LC meetings can be critical to student growth because it provides the opportunity to look at student data, identify areas for growth, and plan next steps. For example, in my building, LCs have been most successful when we have an agenda and meet together weekly to go through an ODM protocol, which is an ongoing data meeting. Having consistent time together to analyze data and plan next steps creates teacher clarity about how students are progressing and meeting grade level expectations. Another use of our time during LCs could be to use our BPP, which is our backwards planning protocol, to dig into standards and assessments and plan lessons. And what you see on screen is the program evaluation questions that help us measure whether educators are meeting NLCs and the sort of work they do there. The strategic plan is very specific about what kind of work should happen in LCs, and so that is why you see so many measurement topics under the first question, such as, I actively engage in a learning community, our learning community focuses on student learning, or our learning community analyzes student results. This slide tells us what the data is showing us about the health and status of learning communities in D51. As Linnea mentioned earlier, this bar graph reflects 673 responses across all levels. What you can see is that more than 3/4 of respondents consistently meet in learning communities. And for the purposes outlined in the goals of this focus area, this is a huge celebration for us, knowing that LCs are a proven strategy for accelerating students' learning and because of our proximity to meeting that 100% mark. And to tell you about other program evaluation results, here's Heather Flick.
Hi there, I'm Heather Flick, Coordinator of Secondary Coaches and Professional Learning. And Linnea mentioned earlier, 2 questions were added to this year's program evaluation model so that we could measure each of the strategic plan professional learning goals. On screen in bold are questions aligned to the goals 2 and 3. A question about the extent to which their curricular resources affirm different cultural viewpoints, and a question about the extent to which their curricular resources support the social and emotional needs of students. Because these questions are newly added, the data on the next 2 slides gives us a baseline data and an opportunity as professional learning department to improve. In response to whether educators' curriculum resources supported the social and emotional needs of students, 52.5% of the 673 respondents either agreed or strongly agreed. Just over half of educators responded favorably, which is a celebratory circumstance. However, it also leaves room for improvement. And because we have not calibrated on this specific question before, it's hard to know what factors might have influenced respondents' answers. For example, students' behavior or discipline concerns easily could have colored these data. Still and again, the baseline data for Goal 2 is both statistically positive and an area for growth. At the end of the presentation, we'll share more about our next steps. Nextly, though, I'll share the data connected to Goal 3. In response to whether educators' curricular resources acknowledge and affirm different cultural viewpoints, 61.7% of the 673 respondents either agreed or strongly agreed. This baseline data for Goal 3 is also and even more favorable. Once again, we find this both celebratory and an opportunity for growth, because by year 3 of the strategic plan, we want to see 100% of educators responding favorably in questions aligned to each of these 3 goals. So to tell you more about how we will aim to meet these goals, I'll hand it back over to Linnea and Jamie.
Going forward, this task force will continue to influence the designs of professional learning aimed at preparing and supporting staff through 3 professional learning goals outlined in the strategic plan. Next year, we anticipate getting broader participation by extending program evaluation questions to audiences other than educators who have had a new resource. By including more educators and by continuing to align and monitor our progress, we would expect to see increases in each of the baseline data points presented this evening.
As Linnea and each of tonight's presenters have said, we have many tools and opportunities for reaching our strategic plan goals. It would be important to note, however, that what we've shared tonight is not an exhaustive list, and we do support professional learning on other occasions or with other groups of educators. For example, each school has one multi-tiered Systems of Support or MTSS teacher leader, And once a month after school, he or she gets learning about how to support students' ever more diverse needs. So there's more that we could have said about D51's professional learning, but what was most important for us to communicate is that we're aligned in our goals and initiatives. And with data now filtering through our program evaluation, we're positioned to make significant progress over time. And what questions might you have for all of us?
So one question I'm curious about is, and maybe you do this at the building level, but how are we addressing maybe those teachers and educators where maybe they're falling through the cracks? Like, is that something that as maybe building principals, I don't know, like where are we addressing where maybe some of our educators might not feel like they're getting the professional learning that they feel they need? Because I'm thinking of kind of a newer teacher versus more of a veteran teacher, or maybe you guys are addressing all of that once they get to those learning communities, but I don't know, it just is something that made me think about, like, while we think about the diverse needs of students, we have diverse staff as well. So I wonder just how we analyze the needs that they might have for these things.
Sure. I can start with that one. One of the things I think what you're really talking about is like that job embedded professional learning that people are looking for. And so one of the ways that we can support that is through instructional coaches. Instructional coaches can sit down and meet with the teacher and meet with them right where they are. The teacher often has a goal that they want to work on, and they think about like events that they want to have happen to support that. And they think about the data they want collected, and most importantly, how that's going to impact the students in the classroom. And so coaching would be one way that we have to differentiate professional learning for teachers.
Could you explain to me what do you mean by different cultural values?
Different cultural values in regards to?
Yeah, goal.
Yeah.
That language comes straight from the strategic plan and doesn't have definition in our system. And so Heather spoke to it, maybe only briefly, but said this is the first time we've asked that question and we haven't calibrated on what it means. We haven't defined it as a system. It's on screen now. What does it mean to acknowledge and affirm a different cultural viewpoint? What is a different cultural viewpoint? We haven't defined it as a system. And it's the first time that we asked it in order to get the baseline data. And now that it's a part of our systems and our structures, we mean to coach into it and include it in our professional learning. But the first thing would be to define some of those. And it's work we haven't done. We haven't done that work.
Okay.
Yeah.
It seems like you asked the question and yet 57 agree, but if they don't know what the definition,
Right.
that 57 is meaningless to me.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
that's concerning.
Right? What does it mean? And for both of these data points,
Yeah.
these three goals of the strategic plan were challenging to collect data on. And so we found as a large team a mechanism to finally do that. So we were excited to have data to look at, to know where we're at as a system, because those are hard things to measure. And now we have the data. So now how do we get more data to represent all educators in our system? Because 673 is a pretty good response rate, but it's not all educators in our system. And then when they responded to that question, what did it mean? What did it mean and where are we going as a system? So what you've heard tonight are some of the PL designs that support it and some of the guiding documents like our teaching and learning framework that will help us get more targeted.
So do you have a timeline of when you're going to look for definitions and get that part done?
Right, for definitions, I don't have a timeline, but the embedded work, yes, it's this brightly colored calendar. Because the works that we do in academics, we call that AIM 1, and the work that we do in culture and belonging and of affirming students and who they are and their identities, AIM 2, is connected. And so each of the designs are different from level to level. So you heard a little bit about that, but not an exhaustive story. And the NICS that Jackie spoke about at secondary, we do that work together in one setting. We have a consultant supporting us next year. But that's a different structure at elementary. And so it's an awfully complex web, but what this gives us is baseline data to start making progress against, so we can start to progress monitor. Because we run these surveys every 6 months.
But then this is our second year of our strategic plan. Next year is our third, and then we're going to start working next year in our third for the next strat plan, strategic plan, which will be for 5 years. And so what we learn from these first 3 years, we'll be able to identify better language and how are we going to monitor the goals before we jump in. And this was our first at bat. I think we've done a pretty good job, but now we can evolve.
Well, I just think if you're going, I like that you have that in here. I do like that, and I do like that you're going to do training regarding all that. But if you don't have the definition, then how do you know you're doing the correct training? That's just my concern. I just want to
That's fair.
understand that part of it, I guess.
No, it's a good point. And actually, even thinking back to when we developed the strategic plan, there wasn't really work that was put into, as was mentioned before, defining some of these things. And then even, maybe folks that were working on some things at that time are not in that same role. And so there's been a lot of change throughout the last 2 years as well. So that's good feedback for when we go into not only the work that we're already doing leading into year 3, but as we work with CEI on the next strategic plan to say, hey, we need some more emphasis on making sure we define these terms and categories within the strategic plan so that everybody's clear on what that means and what we're actually supposed to be measuring. And so, it was a first round of actually implementing a strategic plan. And so that's a good example of something we can ask for differently on the next one.
I think to piggyback on that is, one, I think defining the term is the first, I guess, domino that goes into that. But then we have different cultures here in town, and locally, right? And then I think we want our students to appreciate the culture that they're tied to, but then obviously expose those kids to the vast array of other cultures or worldwide. And so I'm probably getting to step 20 when we haven't even got to step 1 of defining what that means, right? Because I think there's an appreciation of your culture, which I think we probably do with our own students here. But then if we're talking about culturally diverse, then what all other things are we talking about with students, and how much of that can we implement into our studies? Because going through the curriculum with you guys, we know that we have very limited time with our students in certain aspects. And so I just I think the definition 1 will help, but because 2, I don't want to put too much on our teachers to try to have to cram so much into a time frame that they're not even feasibly going to be able to obtain. So I think as you guys work it out, you'll probably be able to answer some of these questions for us. And so I'm not looking for an answer tonight, but I think it's just more of kind of a thought process of what do we do for the students and the cultures we know that we have in our community, versus what do we have the ability and time to do to expose them to the rest, so.
I'm talking about not necessarily just cultures regarding race. I'm talking about cultures regarding being poor, mental health, children with disabilities, all those type of cultures also. I think it's important for teachers to understand those cultures. If you have a parent that has a child that's disabled, what is their thought process, or culture of the poor? How do they look at things? I wasn't just looking at race. I was looking at the whole line of everything.
I believe when we start that, the process for our next strategic plan, which will be next year, we're finishing up one and we're going to start another, and we'll be able to address those and have some better understanding and ideas of what went well and what do we still need to know more with this strategic plan.
Right, so obviously the definition, because when I hear cultural, obviously that wasn't what I was thinking versus what Jose Luis was thinking. So I think the definition is important if we're trying to set an expectation for our teachers to be able to understand what we're looking for them to do. So, agreed.
All of this work is connected, and you heard earlier about our 2024 strategic plan. That first core belief is all learners can and will learn when they feel included, respected, and valued by their learning community. We've set a stage to do this work as a team. The people that you see in front of you, we're working together. We're all in parts of different departments, working together and working with site leaders, working with people in the field to make sure that it's all connected. We're excited about the coherence that we're building around this. It is year 2, and we don't have a clearer picture for you right now, but that's because this work is underway. And we're really pleased, again, Jen said, to have data to present to you tonight, baseline data that we haven't had the opportunity to share before.
And I do appreciate that you took that step.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really good step to go forward.
Yep.
And I do appreciate that you're actually looking at those type of issues, so thank you for that.
And I think it's important for the board to know too, thank you, that we'll need to rely on national standards and outside agencies and consultants to help us do some of this work. This is really big, important work that we are not necessarily equipped to lead, that sometimes we'll need support and to reference nationally things that are happening to support us in some of those designs, so.
Is this all currently internal work, or do we have a consultant at the
We don't have a consultant, no, this is internal, yep. But I mean, like social emotional learning has standards, or social emotional learning standards that we could be referencing at a national level, so things like that, instead of making it up ourselves.
And this data is perception data. So sometimes perception data might be different than correct. And so this is perception. But a perception is the first place, is a place to start. Until we lift it with our teachers in that professional, in those professional learning venues, sometimes they see it or sometimes they may not, to no fault of their own.
No, and I agree that we need to look at it. I just worry, again, with how little time we have on certain subjects and how much we can actually get in. Because if we're talking about rigor, rigor is being thorough on something. And so I know you guys have to juggle a lot of things with that. It's like, how do you get rigor and then try to address all this gamut of everything? And so I don't necessarily envy the position you have to try to figure that out. So I just, again, just more of a comment and trying to, and just kind of thinking aloud is, I don't want to overwhelm our teachers where we sacrifice rigor of going through something very thoroughly by just trying to I guess get through everything. And so I know it's a balance that we need to look through. So I think you guys do a great job. I mean, just in having the conversations with, Jackie and I know your team, you guys are very thoughtful when you guys approach all of this. And I think while we may need national help, I think you guys know our community, all of you know our community and what our community needs. Because I think there's a balance there too of taking what is happening on a larger level, but we don't want to sacrifice of how we know how our community works and those communities within the community, if that makes sense.
We're all classroom teachers. I think no matter what title we just shared, we still identify as classroom teachers. And, I'm just going to keep coming back to these beliefs while I've got a microphone in my hand, because I think they're that important. That first one, again, says all learners can and will learn when they feel included, respected, and valued by their learning community. So we see these goals as requisite to learning. They're requisite to learning. It needs to be in our system, and we embrace the challenge of making it all fit with the time that we have. And that means being really clear amongst ourselves and with teachers about the outcomes and what it means. And we're excited to be taking on that work. And that's the first belief. And the second belief is through rigorous academic learning opportunities, all learners must be challenged, believed in, and supported to reach common high expectations. And the third is that learning is enhanced when we measure it and we monitor and we give students opportunities to practice and assess and give feedback. And the fourth is that educators working together are the thing that makes a difference for kids. So we're so glad that this presentation reinforced the first, because that 2024 Teaching and Learning Framework is going to help us make big changes in our system.
Any other questions, board? All right, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you all being here this evening. Yes, yeah, give them a hand. This is a lot of extra work they do, probably outside of their other duties that they have. All right, so then up next, we have the culturally and linguistically diverse education presentation.
Sit down. Jen's everything. You're all my people. Oh, Reggie, you sit right here. You sit here. You're the talker.
You're the talker. You're the slide mover. Okay. All right. Good evening, board. I'm Dan Bonnell, the Executive Director of Student Services. I've asked the culturally linguistically diverse education team to join you this evening in order to keep you informed about some of the changing demographics among our multilingual learners and our student population within District 51. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Linnea Holshoff to my left, the coordinator of our CLDE programming, as well as Regina Quintana next to her. And then to my right, I've also got Lisa McCall. These are the two instructional coaches who support our CLDE program. So I will turn it over to Dr. Holshoff.
Good evening again. Thank you for giving us some of your time tonight to talk more about the groups of students our department serves. I'm going to start just by grounding us in a few common terms and some of the laws that we're obligated to serve. You might hear us generally refer to this group of students as multilingual learners. Perhaps in other contexts, you've heard words like English learner, English language learner, ESL student. Essentially, we're referring to the same group of students when we use all of those terms. Colorado state statute, however, defines multilingual learners as students who are linguistically diverse and have a level of English that not only requires us to develop their English skills, but also to support them in accessing grade-level academic content. In addition to our state laws, there's also a number of federal laws that our department works under. One of those court cases that was particularly influential in how districts ended up serving multilingual learners was Lau versus Nichols. It was a court case brought forward in the 1970s. Some Chinese American students in California brought a case against their school district. Basically, they claimed that the lack of linguistically appropriate accommodations effectively denied the students equal educational opportunities on the basis of ethnicity, as required under the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The Supreme Court ruled in the students' favor, stating that there is no equality of treatment merely by providing students with the same facilities, textbooks, teachers, and curriculum. For students who do not understand English are effectively foreclosed from any meaningful education. What that essentially means is that we have to do something different for our language learners so that they understand what's happening in their classroom. So as we shift to thinking about the district's changing multilingual learner demographics, it will be essential to frame those conversations with this idea that we're obligated to provide a meaningful education for our linguistically diverse students, and there are a number of laws that outline our accountabilities in doing so. So, despite the fact that our district has seen an overall decline in student enrollment, there is one group of students where we're seeing an increase, and that's a group of students that are often called newcomers. The U.S. Department of Education typically defines a newcomer as a person who arrived to the United States within the last 2 years. It's also important to note that it's a very heterogeneous group of students. They have very different needs, and some of them, when they come, adjust very easily to living in the United States, while others face significant hurdles. Oops. I'll skip that one, sorry. In addition to acquiring the English language, many of these students come with varied educational experiences. Some newcomers may already be fluently bilingual and proficient in grade-level literacy skills, while others may have experienced gaps in their education. The students that have experienced gaps or limited or interrupted formal education are often referred to as SLIFE students. This is important to understand because District 51 is seeing an increase in students who are enrolling with limited or interrupted formal education. To help us understand more about these changes, Regina is going to share some demographic data pertinent to District 51's multilingual population.
All right, thanks, Linnea. Before we take a closer look at how these student numbers are changing in our district, I'd like to make sure that you know the reporting codes that are used by the state of Colorado listed on the graphs that we're going to look at today. The first code that you're going to see is NEP, which stands for Non-English Proficient, or students who are new to English. These students are just in the early stages of learning English. The next code you will see is Limited English Proficient, LEP, which these students are learning English within our program, they're progressing with their skills, and they're building some quality academic English. The last two codes that you will see are Monitor Year 1 and Monitor Year 2. These represent students who have become fluent in English. They've exited our program, but we continue to monitor their academic progress for 2 years, which follows state requirements. Okay. On this slide, what's important to highlight first is on the left, and that's the increase of students that we are seeing who are new to English. First, you will see that in almost 1 year's time, from November of 2022 to October of 2023, we saw an increase of 40 students who are new to English. Then, from October to January during this year, we added another 40 students who were new to English. And then from January to about mid-April, we enrolled about another 29 students new to English, despite overall declining enrollment in D51. Now, on the right, you can see the graph there that has our overall numbers, comparing 2022-23, which is blue, to the current school year of up until about mid-April, which you see in red. So the important thing to really look at is where it says NEP, those two columns there. You can see the significant increase in students who are new to English. That's quite a difference there. Just this year, up until about mid-April, there have been about 135 students who are new to English. That is more than the entire year of 22-23. Okay, this graph here shows that we now have about 13 schools with over 30 multilingual learners in their buildings. The red color indicates our students who are newer to English. The yellow represents the limited students who are just progressing in that English proficiency. And then the green and the blue are those students who are in Monitor Year 1 and Monitor Year 2. And on this graph, you can see the representation across the district. Just the breakdown of all our multilingual learners by grade level. You can see that most of our multilingual learners are in the elementary level, with third grade being the highest population of our multilingual learners. Now I'm going to pass it over to Lisa, and she's going to share some of the ways our department has responded to this type of growth.
Thanks, Regina. Starting back in January, we convened a small collaborative team with representatives from the migrant department, as well as family access and opportunity, to think about what we might be able to do in order to be responsive to the increase in our newcomer population. Stemming from that collaboration, we decided to provide extended learning specifically tailored for our newcomers. We are excited to offer 3 weeks of instruction focused on literacy skills and specialized language programming in June. We have had 60 students in grades K through 8 enroll to attend. We have also organized a 2-day course titled Instruction for Newcomers, which will be offered at Summer Institute as a way to support teachers with instructional strategies essential for working with our newcomers. And we have recently convened a work group to think about and support our school-level teams with the complexities that might accompany students enrolling with limited schooling and perhaps without any transcripts. We continue to think about ways to support these students into the next school year. We have gratefully been allocated an additional 3 full-time CLDE teachers, which will allow us to continue to support the increased number of multilingual learners with acquiring and developing English language skills. Furthermore, we are in the process of exploring a possible collaboration with REC, the Riverside Education Center, to provide supplemental literacy interventions for secondary students through after-school programming. Additionally, we've recently received the exciting news that the state will provide the district with a little over $400,000 in additional one-time funding to support this influx of population of students. The department plans to allocate this money to provide professional development for teachers and staff, to pay for additional curricular resources, language assessment tools, and academic support programs, as well as support parent and community engagement efforts. We know that this is a dynamic group of students and that they have unique needs, and that we will continue to proactively think about how to serve them in District 51. Does anybody have any questions for us?
So on the slideshow that we have here, the last thing that you mentioned, you said that the state is providing an additional $400,000, which is one-time funding, and that's specifically to assist teachers with education on how to handle students that are language learning or English language learning and those students. Is that correct?
Linnea, would you like to take this one? Thanks. Okay, Dr. Hill.
Well, and you may have more to add. From a financial standpoint, yeah, the state allocated $24 million this year, one-time funds to help districts across the state. I think districts across the state were expressing that there have been challenges with the increase in students because just the different needs. And so if students enter the school district after the October count, we don't receive funding for students who enter after that. And so that happens all the time, right? But especially if you're going to have students that come with additional needs, like being new to the country, having limited English proficiency, there was a request for more funds. So $24 million were allocated, and it was allocated to districts based on the numbers, but actually it doesn't really capture all the numbers that you saw up here. And so we are receiving a little over $400,000 to go directly to serving students with those needs. So again, doesn't meet all the needs of the students that that have been enrolled in our district since then. And it is, unfortunately, it's one-time dollars. Now, if the students, stay and continue to enroll with us next year and they are added to our October count, then we'll get district funding, per pupil funding for students. That's another thing to note too. The $400,000 isn't equivalent to per pupil funding from the state. So we receive around $10,000 per student. That's not how they did this formula. So it's actually not even adequate to what you would receive for a student who's enrolled in our district. So that was a long-winded way of saying, yes, we're getting some money. It is one time, and it is supposed to be spent on the needs of students who are newcomers to our district. I don't know if you have more to add.
I'd like to add. So I believe that the state determined they funded this $400,000 on 52 students. Those 52 students were the students that came within a window of after October and mid-February. And you saw as the numbers that Linnea and her team presented, we have far more than 52 students. But that was the window that they captured that data in.
I have questions. You didn't talk about, when you said that they're non-English proficient, but I know that there's some youth that come in that they're illiterate in both languages. You didn't speak to that at all. So I was wondering if, because I've been into some of the CDL classrooms, I'm impressed by them, by the way, but I saw that they didn't have some kids that were illiterate in both languages. And then you asked for an increase in CLDE staffing teachers. You didn't ask for aides. And I was just wondering how come? Because if the teacher is speaking to the majority of them that are somewhat proficient in English, but you have somebody that's illiterate in both languages, don't you need also an aide there? Just a question.
So in thinking about your first question about kids that might not have literacy skills in their first or second language, those are often lumped into that group of students that we're referring to as, they're often students that have limited or interrupted formal education. And so those would be some of the characteristics associated with that group of students. There's perhaps that they have low literacy skills or no literacy skills in either language. They possibly have low numeracy skills. They might have some gaps in their academic content, maybe in their identity as learners. So I kind of was referring to those kinds of skill sets when we're thinking about those students with the interrupted or formal education. And there's definitely an increase of those within our schools now.
About you asking, you want teachers, but you didn't say anything about aides.
So,
and they seem like they'd be high needs.
Yeah. Okay, I'm happy to also, yeah, go ahead.
To answer that question, we'll take as much as we can get, whether it's teachers, or the paraprofessionals. We had some choices to make, Jose, when it came to the exact needs of what you saw up there on the screen. Our non-English proficient students and the high numbers that we saw, are the most intense, most needy students that we have that need more explicit direct instruction from a classroom teacher. So that was the reason why at this point, and I'll come back for more. I'm going to ask for more, right? But at this point, it was about teachers because we needed to get some of the class sizes down. Our numbers in some of our schools were exceeding, 35 to 40 students on caseloads for our CLDE teachers. So it was about right now at this point in time, Linnea really and I discussing the need for the explicit instruction delivered by a certified CLDE teacher versus the paraprofessional in the classroom. Both very important. Paraprofessional is important to that work as well. But at this point in time, that is where we're at, trying to get those caseloads down. And then obviously, I'll come back and ask you for more later. So, okay.
I think in addition to that, we are still operating under an agreement with the Office of Civil Rights. And under that agreement, we are required to provide 45 minutes of explicit language instruction each day, and for newcomers, something more. And when our paraprofessionals are serving in those roles to support those students, we can't count through that agreement that those minutes count towards meeting our requirements there. And so with certified, qualified teachers, we're able to provide better services in terms of meeting our agreement. So that was another factor to consider.
I have one more question. So your CLDE teachers, are they in elementary, middle school, and high school, or just in high school?
Yes, we have teachers across all three levels, elementary, middle school, and high school. And no matter how big the numbers are in a school or how small the numbers are in a school, we're still providing services. So we do have some buildings with, 1 or 2 language learners, and we're making sure that we have a teacher that goes there and provides services as well.
Bueno, thank you.
So just, this may be speaking out of absolute ignorance when it comes to this, but did we create any additional positions for this particular program? If so, how many? And how are they being sourced out? So I guess my first question is, did we create new positions for this, and how many?
Let me start, and you can do the math part, because it's a special algorithm on the math at which she provides services across all of our buildings. Yes, 3 additional FTE.
But wait, you had FTE in ESSER, and so those FTE in ESSER were pulled over, and we added.
Correct. We did. We had some positions that were in our ESSER funds, so we were allowed to keep, or we found money to be able to keep the ESSER positions, just change the funding source on those, and then an additional 3 FTE just in the last couple weeks. And so at the teacher level, that's where we're at. So yes, we did receive some additional teaching supporter FTEs, and then how she utilizes them across the system, I'll let her explain, because it's rather complicated, because we're only talking 31 to 32 teachers across multiple sites, 45 sites. So she's got a pretty good plan to be able to serve, but I'll let her explain that.
I think it's just important to note that it's not a new position, it's just creating more of the same position that we already had in terms of CLD teachers that are providing this explicit instruction in English, helping kids know the language of English. And yeah, it is kind of complicated to try to figure out who goes where, but we just try to make sure that we have a teacher that can serve all of our schools. And so sometimes that means serving a building at a 0.5 or a 0.25 and then matching it with another building that's, I try to think about geography and schedules and staffing formulas and all of those things to try to make it all work together so that all of the language learners across the district are getting services.
And, just this is one piece of the large puzzle of every year we talk about, position requests and what can we actually afford and not afford, and having to make some decisions. And so those are tough decisions, right? We'd like to be able to fund every position that's requested. If we want to be able to do that, we can't be 173rd out of 178 school districts in per pupil funding. We have to talk to our community about how we receive better funding through our mill levy overrides. And so when we don't have really great funding as a school district, we have to make some tough decisions on how many positions do we give to this department and this department. And so, yeah, I'd love to give more positions to every department. And, you know, when we're doing things like we're having to go through school closures and we're going to have to use $2 million out of reserves to fund unfunded positions at elementary schools. Like you have to be really smart about your budget and keeping it balanced. While knowing that we have increased needs in our community and within our school district. So we'd like to get to a point where we're not having to say no to things and being able to say yes to the positions that we need in a district while also taking care of all the other needs and interests in the district as well.
So with that being said, I mean, I know we have the $400,000 coming in, so that's going to offset us quite a bit, and it might have not even been something that we had taken into consideration before we added the 3 positions. So the total 6 positions that we have, is that something that we're going to be able to fund year after year? Or is that something that we might have to actually look at diminishing at some point, which would be horrible, but.
Yeah, and I've talked to Mel on that. These students will now be part of our October count. So that will have that funding will continue.
per pupil.
Yeah, the per pupil, because they've added to our total student FTE, which then Mel is able to fund.
Well,
Right, and the 400,000 is a one-time, and it's more about materials, curriculum, support, that type of thing. It's not for people, it's not for FTE.
and hopefully, while the new school finance formula is not perfect, it is supposed to account for districts with higher learners of this range or needs, different needs. Instead of just dividing the pie a third, and a third, districts who have those higher needs for those types of learners, we're supposed to get better funding for those. Again, that's not going to kick in right away, but in theory and in looking at it, which this is the one the board had the special meeting about, which was House Bill 1440. Thank you. So hopefully that's something that as we look down the line, we won't necessarily have to cut, but it'll be something where we get better funded as a district. I mean, obviously that's the hope that we all have, so.
And piggybacking on that is a reminder that, you know, losing the 5th year of averaging is going to hurt us because we are in a declining enrollment state. So you're right, we will maybe receive more funding per pupil because of our needs, but as we continue to decline in enrollment, it's kind of offsetting some of those additional dollars, and so we're not going to see that that increase right away. And until we make some tough decisions, we've been making tough decisions, but the rest of the decisions we need to make, we're not going to be able to utilize new funding to be able to meet the needs of our learners. So those are why we have to make some of those decisions as well.
One more question to kind of caveat off of Jose Luis. So he had mentioned about our students that are, to an extent, illiterate in any language. Did those students fall under a different area, under an IEP or anything like that, instead of it falling under the multilingual?
You want some of it? I can do some of it. I mean, obviously, special education is also in my realm. So certainly some of the learners that we've experienced, some of our newcomers come with multiple needs, right? Not just language needs, but we do have students that have come in with some significant medical needs, some significant needs around learning disabilities and things like that. So yeah, we do. We have kids that have a lot of, you know, impact on our system. And so certainly that's something that we're working with in multiple departments, cross-departmental, and really the collaboration with her teams at the building level, with our IEP teams and special education. We also have twice exceptional students coming in as well, which means we have kids that have language barriers, but they're gifted students. And so we're working through, you know, how to meet the needs of our students that are twice exceptional, so.
I would say this is how important language acquisition is, because you can't identify a student with a learning disability until you know that they know and understand the language. So if it's been interrupted, they haven't had the opportunity to learn it because they haven't been taught it, then we can't identify or determine if they have a disability. So first, we've got to teach them the English language before we could determine if they have a disability. However, like Dan just said, we do have students that are coming in that have other needs, and we don't know if it's necessarily a learning disability yet.
I would recommend that the board go see Mrs. Adams at Junction High School. She does the CDL students. They're just totally amazing, just to let you guys know. for Cesar Chavez Celebration. Ali, who is a CDL student, won
Yeah.
our scholarship.
It's amazing.
He speaks well, wrote well, and he'll be going to CMU next year to become in the medical field. So they're amazing students.
All right, any other questions?
I will say, I've got two comments. So one, as we're hearing about this, I do think, it reminds me of really the beauty of public education. So we accept everybody who comes through our doors. And while we know there's challenges associated with that sometimes, that's what we're here to do, and we're here to serve. And so I do want to thank all the folks up here and all the folks in the department that are serving every single student who enters our doors. And then the other thing, I just have to say this because I'm seeing Ms. McCall up here. You know, and in the spirit of Teacher Appreciation Week, just want to thank you because our son is at Dual Immersion Academy, and he actually didn't get in kindergarten because we moved here after the cutoff date, and he got in first grade, and Miss McCall was his first grade teacher. And so you think about that's why I'm not looking at you because I'm not going to cry, but you think about a kiddo who didn't get a full first year of dual immersion experience, and having to catch a kid up, and then also he's finishing fourth grade right now, and he's very successful, and he's loving Dual Immersion Academy, and it's because he had a really great first grade teacher. So I just want to say thank you to Miss McCall for all that she's done for our son.
Yes, thank you very much. I think I appreciate the partnerships that we're garnering too in the local community because while teachers are superheroes, we don't want to burn anybody out. And I appreciate organizations like REC and others that can come in and help support, and we can get those learners hopefully up to speed a little bit more quickly. So, all right, board. Okay, we have some first reading of some policies here. So we have IJL, our library materials selection, and so you guys, we have copies of these because they will be hopefully voted on at our business meeting. We have IIJ, our instructional resources selection and adoption, and JICJ, student use of cell phones and other personal electronic devices, and KEC, our public complaints about instructional materials. So we've been working on some of these for quite a while. And then as Dr. Hill had presented a couple weeks ago on the student use of cell phones and other personal electronic devices, it's really important for us to look at this one. Does the board have any questions or comments right now?
Yeah, and just to share on that one, because I know it has garnered a lot of attention recently, and so just like with any first reading, any thoughts y'all have over the next 2 weeks, we definitely want to hear them. You know, what we're planning on doing as well is now that the first reading is put out there, I'll send this out to all of our principals and get feedback from them as well on if there's any language changes they want to see or to make sure it makes sense. But the main things that I want to mention that are in there, there's some language adjustments so it makes it clear around personal electronic devices versus the former term that was used in there. It defines some examples of what that is, and then it really differentiates it by level. So what we're looking at right now, based on feedback from teachers, principals, even students, K through 8 would be a start of school, end of school, no access to these devices. And so just want to make that very clear. That's the language that would be in this policy. High school is a little bit different, and that's mainly from some of the feedback that we received around bandwidth of staff and then being able to enforce an all-day quote-unquote ban. And so we really focused, and Tammy's wording in there is really focused on that instructional time and really defining what instructional time is. It's the start of class to the end of class. It's not when your teacher gets done teaching that you get your smartphone out. It is start of class to end of class. And so there is some differentiation there, so I want to be clear about that as well. And then also there's some language in there about it being off limits and things like bathrooms and places like that. And there are some exceptions in there. So IEPs, 504s, if a student has a medical or a healthcare plan, there can be exceptions, obviously, for if a student needs access to some of these devices for those type of things. So want to make that clear in case there's any family members that are listening and thinking that their kid might need that. Also, in case of if it's necessary for emergencies, there's language in there about that as well. And then also if a teacher has an instructional purpose for the device, that there are opportunities for them to be able to work with their principal on when they might need to use the device for that. And then the last piece in there is really around violations and consequences. It's not really getting in the weeds because we don't want to dictate too much exactly what it's going to look like on every single campus, but there's flexibility in there for administrators to be able to impose, certain consequences if students are violating the policy. So while it's not finalized yet, that's the main gist of it. And the biggest piece is, and just want to put it out there because assuming this gets passed in 2 weeks, we want families to be prepared next school year that if you have a student in K through 8, they will not have access to their smartphone all day long. They will not have access to these devices all day long, and we need families to help us with that so that that's successful. And then also at the high school level, during honoring that instructional time and removing distractions from instructional time during the day. The other thing that we've been working on is we sent out a survey to admin asking like what tools would you need to help with this, and so we've got a lot of data from them on if it's a wooden box in the class that kids can put their devices in or whatever that might be, and so we've captured that data as well, and we've got some community partners that are working with us on funding to be able to pay for those so it wouldn't come out of the district's funds. And so that's also something that we're working on. But the main thing for y'all tonight is just if you have feedback over the next 2 weeks, please let us know, and we'll make sure that we get feedback from the folks that are going to have to implement this at the campus level, along with the feedback we've already collected. So this won't be new to anybody necessarily. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think just some questions I have off the top of my head, which again, don't need to be answered right now, but if you just want to, because I'm sure other people might be thinking them, is we have surveyed the high schools about how students will store their phones, or because I think the one piece of feedback we got, I think across the board from both teachers and even students, was consistency, right? And I think there has to be some kind of consistency. So, and again, I know with policy, you don't want to write yourself so tight into policy that it's then hard to uphold. And so you try to leave yourself some leverage there so then individual buildings can do what they need to do. So, but we are looking at wanting each of our buildings to have something, right? Some kind of device to store those phones. Because I think, if I'm a student walking in, and we've already heard this, we have some educators who are doing a really good job where their phones, the phones have to be put away somewhere once they walk into that classroom. And then we have just others that haven't done it. And so I just don't know if in the policy we need to say that there will be some kind of, phone device or phone storage container that will be provided, and we don't necessarily need to specify what that is, but that when the students walk into every single room, especially at the high school level, they're going to see that there is something there for them to be able to, for their phone to be put away. And I think that helps, in my mind, and I could be wrong, that helps our educators know that everybody's going to have something, that there's something that students are expected to put their phone away when they're in that instructional time in class. And I know we're allowing it during passing time. I would just obviously encourage students to just not get your phone out in between, because I think that's the problem. Like we talk about kids being tardy to class, or there being some absenteeism, and a phone can derail a student in between the passing period. I know it's way hard for us to, at the high school level, to monitor that. I don't know if we can put some language in there that we strongly encourage for phones to just to stay put away during passing period. I get lunch. I mean, if it's an open campus and they can go, off campus, they're gonna wanna check their messages, and I don't see that as unreasonable. I do worry though that we're gonna do all this work and then kids will get derailed during passing period time and they won't get to class, or they're gonna see a message that's something, and I think that just doesn't actually support what we're trying to do. Now, K through 8, that makes complete sense. I mean, again, I know it's hard for our staff to be able to monitor that passing period, but I don't know if we could just put that the board strongly encourages just even during passing periods for the phones to stay put away, so.
Yeah, and those are great points, and they're things that we, went back and forth on. Because I agree. I even had a student at one of the student advisory groups that said, "Well, if you do this, then kids are just going to immediately pull their phones out when they're in the hallway." And so, as much as we can create phone-free spaces in the buildings, I think that's the goal. But we ran into some things with thinking through implementation that made us differentiate what high school might look like, but I do like the idea of encouraging not getting them out during passing periods or even lunch. You know what, we talked to the high school principal this morning, and we'll have level meetings all week. And this was one of the topics. And what I tell them a lot is that there's not a perfect plan, but we can try to have perfect implementation of the plan. And so you're right. If we have certain folks that aren't enforcing this and some that are, it's going to crumble. And so we really need consistency in our buildings to say, and honestly, that what we've heard is that this is actually going to give freedom to our educators and our teachers to be able to enforce these policies, because it's something that we are pushing out as a district and that we're saying is an expectation, and it gives that freedom. So I will say and you mentioned it, the issue with putting too much detail in the policy. Like, I've already heard from one principal, they actually do a really good job with this already, and so they don't necessarily want storage things in their classrooms, because they make their kids keep them in their backpack and their lockers all day, because it's a middle school, and so they don't want to derail from what they're already doing. And so, you know, we want to leave some flexibility for schools, but if they don't have something in place like that, or they're not successful, they need to be able to have these other tools. And so it's a good point. And then there will be some differentiation, and we've got at least one school, maybe a couple others that want to, that are interested in piloting those Yonder bags, where it locks the phone in the bag for the kids all day. And so that'll be interesting to see if we can pilot that and see if that's successful. And then maybe some other schools might come around and say, we want to try that too. And again, that would be where you've got some outside resources that are interested in funding that for us, so that that's not a burden on the school district.
Maybe the wording could just be that we expect each school to come up with a consistent procedure for the phones to be put away. So if that is in purses and backpacks and they don't come out, and then they can also implement whatever consequences those are. Like, again, obviously a school could take what we have put in the policy and they could make it more. And so maybe if we could just state that there needs to be some consistent procedure across every building. And so if that is some kind of storage device in every classroom, then just make sure it's consistent. If it's in backpacks, then let's just make sure it's consistent. So I think that's all I ask for as a board member, is that whatever we do, that it's consistent building wide, and every teacher, and every person in that building is agreeing upon what it is, so then everybody's on the same page. So maybe we can just kind of specify that we ask each, building to just have a consistent plan, and that's implemented. And I don't mind if teachers need to make the board the bad guys and just say, like, you know what, I have to do this because it's board policy, and we do expect it. Because I hope also that we're monitoring data by behavioral and mental health issues and our academic outcomes, because based off of all the data that you shared with us, along with other news reports that we've seen across other districts, behavioral issues typically decrease and academic outcomes increase. And so I'm hoping that we're monitoring that data in our buildings as well.
And I'd say most of the feedback that we've received, and I know the principals have received, has been positive. People don't realize what's being implemented until it's being implemented, so I'm sure we'll get some feedback in the fall once this is all followed through on. But it's been positive, and I think it's a topic that it goes beyond. There's no real divisiveness around this for folks. This isn't like a political issue. This is literally there's data now that points to the negative impacts of smartphone usage and social media on students, and I think everybody can get behind the fact that we want to create these distraction-free zones within our classes, so that students can focus on why they're there, and that's to learn, and it removes the burden for teachers to have to try to police this all the time, ideally. So I am excited to see, once we implement this, what the impact would be, and some data around are we seeing positive results from it. So I am appreciative of the board pushing for this and being supportive of it as well, because I think it'll be good for our district.
Could we also, maybe with Elizabeth and her team, and maybe we already have something like this, but maybe it could get sent out to our families of just sort of like some tips and tricks, because, after hearing about the Mueller report and the suicidality that we have in our district, we know that if kids get poor sleep, that is kind of a precursor to obviously other issues which can lead to those suicidal thoughts because they're not resting. And if the phone is on all night and if it's going off, and even I know studies say that you need to be off the phone an hour before bedtime, maybe we can give our parents and families some tips and tricks that might support them and help them at home. Because if kids can have that support outside of school, I think it makes it easier for them to do it inside of school. And I know sometimes as parents, there's so much, and as families, you have so much coming at you that maybe if we could just provide like a one-page, tips and tricks of things that help support students when they're then at home, then they're not, they're not on it, at school, and then we don't want them to go home and then like binge, being on the screens. So I just, because my real goal here would be, and I know because we're getting a lot of community support with this, would be a really community-wide movement for the well-being of everyone. I mean, because screens affect adults too. So I do wonder if, I know the Colorado Forum, their foundation is looking to help support community-wide. So maybe we could just look at something that we could send out to families, like that would help support them once this kind of goes in place as well.
No, it is important, you're right, because we only get the students for, 7-8 hours a day. And so we have been putting little things like in the Friday updates to try to, some tips how to check screen time and things like that. But having a more structured approach to that would be good. And then the other thing we've talked about doing is an FAQ that would go out along with once this policy is approved. Because I'm sure we'll get questions about it. So what does this mean for communication during the day? How do I communicate with my kid then if they don't have their phone on? Well, you can call the front office. So what if an emergency happens? So try to put some FAQs out there too so we can help with answering any questions ahead of time before the new school year starts. And again, as much as we can get things out before the next school year starts, the better, so that we can have our families help us with the implementation, and they can ideally prepare their students for what's coming. And then also, then they're not having to go pick up phones for after school when they get confiscated. So.
Very good. All right, any other thoughts or questions? All right, well, if there's anything that comes up, obviously, next couple of weeks, make sure that you get with Dr. Hill or Tammy on these policies if we see anything that we want to add or clarify. So, all right. We have open board discussion before we head into our business items. So, board, is there anything that?
Yes, could we have Mel come up and?
Sure, Mel, could you come up for a moment?
Share my good stuff after.
Go.
It's good stuff. It's always good stuff. Always good stuff.
Usually good stuff, definitely a lot of numbers. So I was asked just to share kind of a recap of some of the information that was shared over the first part of negotiations. And so certainly it was more detailed, shared there, and then when we go through the processes of presenting and approving a budget, again, it will be the detailed, but just to quickly highlight some of the information is that in our current budget, we've been prudent to plan ahead and set aside funds that'll cover nearly all of our required expenditure and transfer adjustments. The continuation of $5.7 million worth of currently ESSER-funded items, as well as the funding of some priority budget requests, like you heard about the CLDE additional staffing. Custodians are definitely the big items on that list. What that means is that we've nearly taken care of all of that, and then any new per pupil revenue or other expenditure adjustments will be available to put towards salary and benefit increases for staff. So our new per pupil revenue next year is right at $10 million. It's important to note that it would be, if we were not in declining enrollment, it would be $15 million in new money if we just maintain the same number of funded pupils from this year into next. And so we are seeing that impact ramp up, where about 1/3 of our new revenues are being offset by the 500 funded fewer pupils. So when we look at how to close that gap, knowing that not all districts are in that situation and that they would just have the full amount of PPR to put towards their needs. And that's where we've been tasked by the board to continue to seek savings and efficiencies helping to close these funding gaps due to declining enrollment, and maximizing the dollars to support students and staff. And so we've made significant adjustments in that we will be proposing in next year's budget. The largest, of course, is the 8-9 reconfiguration, savings of over $2.1 million from that move. But also just looking at other items that aren't in the millions of dollars, but looking at some of our community partnerships or applying for grants to pick up some of the expenses currently in general fund. And so just really trying to carry out that we're looking at everything and trying to make the best use of our limited dollars. It's been talked about tonight that the board was also supportive of accessing over $2 million to fund elementary staffing levels next year. And so when you fold all of those pieces together, it means that we'll have about $14.7 million to put towards salary and benefit increases next year. So what we presented on the board's behalf was that amount, the $14.7 million, is sufficient to provide a 7% cost of living adjustment and one-step increase for all eligible employees in the district. Specifically to the teacher salary schedule in our presentation was that this would achieve a shared goal of a $50,000 starting salary for teachers, funding for lane movement through attrition, and to continue the allowance for the current GMI transitional stipends. So as presented at negotiations, this is an average of a 10% increase for this employee group, and all other employees would see between a 9.2 and 9.6% increase for other salary schedules. Continuing no out-of-paycheck premiums for health insurance for employees, and then small increases for other coverage tiers. Yeah.
And I would say too that not every, I do want to credit Mel and her team. I don't know that every district prepared as well for the end of ESSER, and because I'm getting a lot of feedback from other superintendents right now, and they're looking at maybe being able to do a 2% salary increase if they're lucky. And so, it's just another great opportunity for us to be able to put as many dollars back towards salaries for our teachers and our staff. And we've been giving these presentations at the high school level on potential bond and mill levy override in the fall, and there's a graph that shows the growth in starting teacher salaries since basically since 2020, and I think if I did my math right, it's over a 30% increase in just the last few years if we can get it to this $50,000 starting teacher salary, and so that's huge in a time of we have had low funding again, like I said, from the state, and declining enrollment, and with these ESSER funds going away, that we've still been able to be strategic with our dollars and being able to prioritize putting as much money back into these salaries as we can. Because even with a $50,000 starting teacher salary, we still have districts that are above that. And so as much as we can continue to try to increase that and be competitive to retain the great staff that we have and then attract staff to our area as well, the better. And so just, it really is a testament to Mel and her team and her staff over the last few years to not get so excited with the ESSER funding that we don't plan for what happens after the ESSER funding goes away. And so I think that's going to be a huge thing for our staff.
Thank you. Yes, you can.
I'd just like to add, Dr. Hill, that I think I appreciate just the approach with that one-time funding that we get in a lot of different areas. The ESSER funds were one of those one-time funding. They were for a moment in time. And so I just appreciate how you guys approach those funds and take care of them and make sure that we don't get into trouble by using them rather than use them in the correct way that they're intended. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think, one of the other things that the district was doing, and obviously the board got behind, was an audit, because we were kind of wondering after the ESSER dollars, certain positions were obviously established during ESSER, and we were wondering what positions we want to retain. And I think at that point too, it kind of propelled us to think about what are things that we're still getting, that we've done for a long time? Are we getting a good return on investment for those things? And maybe what new things have we implemented that we're seeing a good return on investment? And then vice versa. What things have we done for a long time that now we're seeing a diminishing return? And so Dr. Hill and his team have done that audit of kind of our different positions and working through all of that. And part of that helps us work through getting these funds, because while we do have declining enrollment and it's not fun to consolidate schools and we still have more that we have to address, at least what I feel this board, what we're working to doing, and I think based off of what we've done the past couple of years, is that we're trying to pay our people well and at least stay competitive with the rest of the market. So while some areas are tough and not fun to approach, there's other areas where, because we value the people, we are working to do these types of increases.
And I would add to the audit, so the other piece to it is there's the organizational side of the audit, but there's also the programs that we pay for, and whether or not we are getting that good return on investment, or what's the utilization of those programs. What does that look like? If we're not actually getting a lot of usage out of this program, should we continue to invest in it? And so once we're done with that process, we'll actually have a lot of good feedback and data that we could make some decisions for even next school year or the school year after on maybe some contracts that we have with some different vendors, and whether we should continue to invest in that or put those dollars back into something else in the general fund, like teacher salaries. So that audit's going to be very beneficial for us, not only on an organizational side, but a programmatic side as well.
Yeah, and I'm excited that, the board was obviously presented with a few different options for the COLA and for the base pay. And I know it was really important to us to want to get to that $50,000 base, but we also wanted to give a really good COLA increase, because just with the inflationary cycle that we're going through right now, we know that would help a lot. That helps our entire staff. That COLA helps our entire staff. So I know that was a priority for us. So anyways, thanks for being able to, and I know you were waiting on numbers for utilities and other things when we were wondering if we could get to that point. And so I'm glad that we were able to get that information back to see if that was something that we could do. So Barb, you had some good things?
Do have good things. So I think quite a few of us attended the military swearing-in event that was at the Fruit of Vietnam Memorial it was last Saturday, I believe. That was put on by the Blue Star Moms. They do quite a bit for our community. And just as someone that joined the military straight out of high school, I realized that it's something that's not, I don't know, I guess it's just not spoken much of. So it's really fabulous that our Blue Star Moms went out of their way to really provide that for our students that are joining the military. They also were part of a military signing at Central High School. As far as I know, that's the one high school that really puts it out there. So they get everybody together. The sheriff came in, Sheriff Rowell, and I'm trying to remember the name of the crew, the motorcycle crew that comes in. Patriot Riders. So the Patriot Riders came in and they put on an entire event out there for these kids that were joining. We had 9 students from Central High School that are joining the military. So pretty awesome. I would love, and I challenge the district, I would love for us to see more for those kids. I mean, I know that we do college signings and we have a lot of different events, but that's just something that, such a small percentage of our students join it, and I think that it would be a fabulous thing for us to recognize in future years.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I can ask, because I know Fruta did a small thing for their students Fruta Monument, I should say, that are entering the military. So we can shoot something out to the.
Yes,
that's the central one, yeah. But Fruta Monument did something too. So we could send something out to the high school principals and say, if you don't already have something planned, here's some ideas, and then make sure to let folks know when those are happening so we can honor the students. And the other great thing too is with graduations next week, I know they usually take a moment to honor the students there, which will be fun. So thanks for mentioning that.
I was able to, and some of you attended also the biliteracy program and the certification. Those large number of youth that are bilingual in different ones, and one young man, Ali, won the Global Biliteracy Award. It's just totally amazing on the amount of young people that from throughout D51 that are bilingual. And I mean, just reading, writing, and speaking, it was just, it was an amazing ceremony. I really enjoyed it.
And his story was so touching of his family coming from Afghanistan and the challenges that they faced just getting over here and kind of leaving everything behind, which I'm sure happens with a lot of our learners that way. But his story was really touching. So I always love going to those. And we always have a packed house. Like, we had to bring in more chairs.
Yeah.
And that happened last year too, so.
Had to bring in 2 full rows.
Well, and we had I think they said we had our first ever R5 student who earned their seal of biliteracy, which was really cool as well. So yeah, a lot of hard work. As our students, they have an opportunity in 5th grade, 8th grade, or 12th grade to earn that seal. And so that was cool to do the 8th and 12th grade, and then we'll do the 5th grade ceremony, I think, next week maybe, unless I missed it. When is it? Okay, good, I didn't miss it, the 21st.
Thank you.
You might need to, I don't think that's on the board calendar.
I don't think so
Maybe
either.
we can get the invite to that, so, okay, thanks.
It is now.
All righty. All right, so we are now going to move into our business items for this evening. So we have some personnel actions. So we have licensed and administrative personnel actions and administrative new hires. Board, are you good voting on the 2 of these together? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve D1 and D2, the licensed and administrative personnel actions and administrative new hires?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, we can go ahead and take the vote.
Mr. Chavez.
Yes.
Mrs. Evanson. Mrs. Heights.
Yes.
Mr. Jones. Ms. Lima.
And if I can just mention, we did have an admin hire in there, so Ms. Summer Kennedy is going to be the new principal next year for Tope Elementary School, so we're really excited for her. Of course, Ms. Bollinger is going to be serving as a site director as Paul Jaby's retiring, and so Ms. Bollinger will be able to help our leaders across multiple schools. And then with Ms. Kennedy coming in, we're really excited. You can see in the packet her experience, but like I did with the other new principal hires, I asked them what they're most excited about, and she messaged to me that she said, first, she wanted y'all to know how excited and honored she is for this new position, and she continues to hear nothing but great things about TOPE as a staff and a school community. She's most excited about, or what she's most excited about, is that she's eager to build relationships with the entire school community and focus on carrying forward the dedication to student learning using the STEAM design. So we're really excited about Ms. Kennedy being the next principal at Tope Elementary School, so we can give her a little round of applause.
All right, well, we have our business meeting in a couple of weeks, and then I know we have 2 meetings in June, and then we take the month of July off, hopefully. Sometimes we've had to call a special meeting in July. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening, and thank you for everyone that stuck around and presented.